Hi, everyone. Welcome to today's webinar titled Stress Management, Strategies for Health and Wellness. Thank you all for joining us. Please note that this session is being recorded. The recording will be available within 1 to 2 days on our website at ce.uci.edu. Please visit our free events page and click on the On Demand tab to view the recording. I will also send an email once the recording is available. The camera and microphones have been disabled for participants. However, please utilize the chat feature. If you encounter any technical difficulties during the webinar, please send a chat message over to us and we will help you troubleshoot any issues. If you have a question for me or our presenter regarding the content of the presentation, please submit it in the chat or the Q&A and we will address it either during the webinar or at the end of the webinar. My name is Christopher Casas, and I am a program coordinator for the business programs team here at UCI Division of Continuing Education. Our presenter today will be Dr. Tara Donahue, our guest speaker and UCI-DC instructor. For today, I'll first start off by giving you a brief overview of UCI Continuing Education, and then I will turn it over to our guest presenter. At the end of the presentation, we will have a brief Q&A session, and I will leave you with our contact information so you can send over any additional questions that we didn't get to address. Here at UCI Division of Continuing Education, we serve the lifelong learning and professional development needs of individuals, organizations, and the community on a local and global scale. Today, we offer over 80 industry-relevant programs, majority of which are online. Our programs and courses cover a variety of topic areas such as the arts, business and leadership, education, engineering, environment and facilities, finance, healthcare, law, life sciences, technology, and boot camps. We also have a corporate team here that can help provide customized trainings for groups or organizations. I would like to quickly highlight our new course, Human Services Management Essentials. This is a brand new course that will provide and assess your management skills within the human services industry. If you would like to view more information, please visit the course page at ce.uci.edu/human services. This course is fully online, open enrollment with no application process required. The course will be offered in the upcoming summer quarter on August 2nd. At this time, I would like to hand over the mic to Dr. Tara Donahue, who will be leading our webinar. Thank you.
Unmute myself. Hello, everyone. My name is Dr. Tara Donahue, and I hold a doctorate in clinical psychology. My clinical research and interests include health psychology, psychoneuroimmunology, and behavioral medicine. To put it simply, I just really like studying the inextricable link between the mind, body, and spirit and the interaction and interplay between them. My prior work experiences include in psychiatric and dual diagnostic inpatient, residential, and outpatient services. During my graduate training, I primarily worked in hospital settings and psychiatric outpatient services where I provided psychological and neuropsychological assessment to assess for ADHD, learning disability, IQ, brain injury, and neurodevelopmental and neurodegenerative diseases such as Alzheimer's. And I provided a range of therapy for people across the lifespan for a variety of mental health issues like anxiety, depression, and trauma addiction. I completed my internship at Kaiser Permanente in San Diego, and I served our veteran population at the Loma Linda VA, where we specialized furthermore in health psychology. There, I conducted a lot of psychoeducational classes, including stress management, biofeedback, long-term repetition, mindfulness, tinnitus management, weight loss management, etc. So I'm happy to be here and share some of those techniques and strategies we use with both clinical and non-clinical populations. Let me see how to move it to the next. There we go. So our objectives for the course, we're going to learn to define the definition of stress and stressors and the difference between the two. Go over some varying risk factors, identify early signs of stress and its associated symptoms, education about the stress and relaxation response. And we're going to cover strategies to manage the stress response and increase our resilience. And I've provided some resources that we will get to at the end as well. So stress defined. The operational definition is that it occurs when an environmental demands tax or exceed an organism's adaptive capacity. And a stressor are the factors causing stress. So you can think of it as a noun and a verb. Psychological stress occurs when an individual perceives that the environmental demands tax or exceed his or her adaptive capacity. So these demands result in physiological and psychological processes that can put the organism, aka us, at risk for disease. Oh, I skipped something. So the stress defined continued. The element of perception is the key component in psychological stress. There's an element of how we appraise our stressful situations that we as humans face that other animals do not. It indicates that we also reflect differences in our personality, differences in physical strength, general health. The way we perceive our world, our interactions, and stress will vary between persons and can determine how our body will respond to stress. So I've included this quick video to kind of quickly summarize the stress response for you.
Have you run away from a saber-toothed tiger recently? Maybe you haven't, but the stress response you feel when you are late to work or the growl your stomach makes when you haven't had anything but an energy bar and coffee in the morning is the same stress response we had when we were cavemen. That stress response is called fight or flight. Grunk is a real-life caveman. He goes to work hunting saber-tooths and rabbits for his family. Unfortunately, the saber-tooth chases Grunk on occasion, and his physical and emotional stress levels go way up. When this happens, Grunk's body's intelligence kicks in to help him escape. His heart rate goes way up, his blood pressure spikes, more adrenaline is produced, and the body moves the blood away from the digestive tract and into the muscles, as digesting food isn't a priority at that moment. Grunk eventually does escape and rests at home, and after 15 to 20 minutes, his body resets and begins to operate normally again. Now, your body doesn't know the difference between running from a saber-toothed tiger or rushing your kids to school. Your body's stress response is triggered in both situations. So your blood pressure, heart rate, and food digestion is the same as Grunk's when he's running away from a tiger. These types of situations could happen every day in our culture. The difference between you and the caveman is the caveman was able to relax in his cave soon after he finished stressing out. So for the whole day, the caveman would stress the duration of a hunt, which would last maybe an hour. You, on the other hand, have to deal with the stress of racing your kids to school, traffic, work, relationships, and everything else that life constantly throws at you. Plus, add in the constant chemical stress that comes from the unhealthy foods we eat, and it's like you are running from the saber-tooth all day long. The solution is to build your own cave. You have to build your own cave every day, and it means finding some peace in the pileup of traffic while driving to work. It means going to bed on time instead of staying up late, binging on your favorite TV shows. It means taking some time to go outside and do some relaxing work instead of locking yourself up in your office. Otherwise, this chronic stress will open you up to most diseases because your immune system will tank and a lack of nutrients that your body needs due to not being able to digest your food properly. Add to that the fact that your adrenals, which are the glands that sit atop your kidney and decide where your hormones go, are so active with the abundance of stress you experience and put into your body, you will develop adrenal fatigue. Put all this together, and now you know why stress is the start of all disease processes. How can we make our fight or flight more effective? How can we turn it off when we don't need it and bring it up when it's necessary? Ask yourself what you are putting in your body for energy. Your body is probably asking your brain for those artificial stimulants you gave, like coffee, processed sugars, or genetically modified foods, because it's confused on why the adrenals aren't filling up like they used to. You have sucked your adrenals dry of hormones that didn't need to be active in the first place. That's huge because we are taking a finite source and sucking it dry. What people may not know is that a lot of things trigger the fight or flight response. Emotional stresses, eating unhealthy foods, overreacting to life's daily challenges, going through tough emotional times, all trigger fight or flight. However, that leaves a lot of areas where we can improve it. So if this video has successfully stressed you out with all the info it's loaded you up with, you should take a minute to relax. At least you don't have a tiger running after you.
So the reason I wanted to show that video is because it illustrates a quick summary of what happens to us when we simply think about things that are stressful to us. We are not running from a saber-toothed tiger or a bear, but we respond exactly the same way. Our body doesn't know the difference. That's the key takeaway from that video. We get activated by a myriad of stressors. It could be thoughts about the past, present, or future. And our physiological body over time with prolonged activation of the stress response can again lead to a myriad of health effects. Okay. So this is a fascinating book. I don't know if you've all heard of it. It's called Why Zebras Don't Get Ulcers. And it's by Dr. Robert Sapolsky. He is a neuroendocrinology researcher and author. He also is the professor of biology and neurology and neurological sciences at Stanford University. His research focuses heavily on stress and neuronal degeneration. And he does this by studying wild animals and baboons in their active habitat in Kenya and Africa. So he identifies sources of stress and patterns. And what he found is that wild animals release stress hormones in the event of an actual emergency, so actual life and death threatening emergency. Whereas humans activate the stress response simply by thinking about something that is stressful or memories from the past and future, including the future, and any emotions that may be distressing. So where they experience episodic, kind of short-lived stress, we can chronically be activated just by our thoughts. So thinking about a future bill, rent, divorce, anything can be stressful. Wild animals are therefore less susceptible than humans to chronic stress-related disorders, again, ulcers, hypertension, decreased neurogenesis, and increased hippocampal neuronal atrophy. Simply put, that just affects the hippocampal region, which is learning and memory. It also affects our attention and concentration in the prefrontal cortex.
Hi, Tara.
Yes.
Sorry to cut you off. We do have a comment asking if you can speak a little louder or closer to the mic. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Let me know if it's louder or if it's not loud enough. Okay. So we're going to review some risk factors. These include personal, interpersonal, and social variables. These are very common. It can be the sense that you have a lack or loss of control over your physical environment, a lack or loss of social support. Again, what we notice is that it's a perceived lack of control over our environment or our social support networks. What may be stressful to some may not be stressful to another, so it's a very unique and subjective experience. People who are dependent on others, like children, the elderly, dependent adults, etc., are more prone to risk. And being in a caregiver role heightens your risk as well. Any individuals who are socially disadvantaged, this includes race, ethnicity, gender, educational level, socioeconomic status, language, disability, sexual orientation, and other diversity variables, are at greater risk of developing stress-related illnesses. General feelings of hopelessness, extreme fear, anger, just your general baseline, these individuals who tend to be more cynical or distrusting are more prone to stress response. So we want to link the psychological stress in our health. And as a result of the pandemic, nearly 90% of individuals report feeling significantly more concerned about their personal health and well-being. It is found to be associated with inflammation, depression, cardiovascular disease, HIV and AIDS, upper respiratory tract infections, asthma, herpes, autoimmune diseases, skin flare-ups. So if you have eczema or psoriasis, it can activate or flare up. Extended wound healing, it slows down the healing process, and it impairs your vagal tone, which has to do with activating the relaxation response in your body, thereby increasing your risk for disease, particularly for cardiovascular disease, and weakens your immune system. So there's been a lot of prospective research and that it just provides more support that psychological stress and cardiovascular disease, morbidity, and mortality are at increased risk. There is a 50% increase in cardiovascular disease risk with people who feel that they have high levels of work stress, which is defined as having little control in their workplace, having high demands, inadequate compensation, or organizational injustice. So what's interesting to note is that among initially healthy individuals, there is a long-term cardiovascular disease risk increase for those healthy individuals who have experienced the following: death of a child, emotional, sexual, or physical abuse during early life or formative years, natural disasters, violence and war, and the perception of job overload, marital distress, or isolation. So these stressful life events have been linked to also major depressive disorder and/or depressive symptoms. 50 to 80% of depressed persons had experienced a major life event or stressor during the 3 to 6 months preceding the onset of a depressive episode. And approximately 20 to 25% of those experience a major stressful event to develop into depression. So initially healthy people who experience something stressful can turn into a depressive episode. Exposures to chronic stress are considered the most toxic because they are most likely to result in long-term permanent changes in emotional, physiological, and behavioral responses that influence susceptibility to and course of disease. So really what they're saying is that the chronic activation of the fight or flight response can lend yourself to disease. It's not the actual stressor, it's the activation of the body's response system to the stressor over time that can weaken. So why is this so important? Well, we know that cardiovascular disease is the #1 killer, at least in the United States alone. At least 50% of people in the population have some sort of heart condition. And a lot of this is related to lifestyle and stress. So this is an ethical imperative. Distress left unchecked may only be seen in the rearview mirror, but it can also result in personal and professional impairment. It's a gradual process. So if we're not managing our symptoms or being able to identify them early on, this can result in impairment. So ultimately, we want to prioritize our well-being, and that's the most important disease prevention step that all of us can take. So I'm going to go over some internal versus external stressors. And again, stressor is the factors causing stress. So types of internal stressors. These are things that activate the stress response by merely thinking about certain things that are negative. Negative self-talk, such as I am not good enough, I'm bad for doing this, and shame and negative thought patterns, they don't like me. Over time, this can activate the stress response and cause a similar effect. Our perception of control and predictability. We are always more prone to stress when we do not have an idea of what's about to happen. A lot of people don't like uncertainty. It's a very natural human thing. Limited coping skills or ability to self-regulate. That also stems from some of our family upbringing. We learn from our family and those around us how to regulate. So the way we watched others regulate is some of the ways we learn to regulate, and they may not always be adaptive. So that depends on the person. Difficulty with communication and asserting one's needs and boundaries is often a big factor. People are afraid to speak up or advocate for themselves or set that limiting boundary at work or ask for help in rescheduling or maybe reprioritizing their work duties. Underlying mental health issues can change your baseline for your stress threshold, meaning that if you already are susceptible to anxiety, stress will be a lot more, you will be a lot more prone to stressful events. Any social and emotional stressors such as job, family demands, the expectations, rather, your expectations that you have on yourself and from others and from your family. having to make a big decision, death of a loved one, divorce, guilt, grief and loss, shame, perceived social and or family support. These are all types of things we really think about and how we perceive that can actively activate the stress response. Also, interestingly, individuals who are high on the trait neuroticism and perfectionism are a lot more prone to stress. And these people usually are grad students, very high functioning individuals, and are more prone to stress because of the high expectations and demands they have implicitly put upon themselves. So it's good to note as well. Certain traits do affect your stress response. These are the types of external stressors. They're not exhaustive, but your physical health overall, medical diagnoses, any kind of financial strain, occupational stress, family issues like caregiver role, major life events like moving, a career change or a job loss, a significant reduction in your pay, sociopolitical issues, any unique stressors like cognitive or physical disabilities, discrimination, racial, cultural, and or acculturative stressors. Physical and environmental stressors include weather, pollution, traffic, noise, housing concerns. And lastly, natural disasters, terrorism, violence, war, and we can include, the pandemic. So what are some of the symptoms of stress? There are varying types. We have physiological, emotional, cognitive, and behavioral. So we'll start with the most blaring ones. These are the ones we know. These are the ones we feel and see in our body. And as you can see, there's a myriad of side effects just simply for the physiological symptoms of stress. These include headaches, migraines, anger, irritability, difficulties with attention, concentration, learning, and memory. Again, skin, acne, eczema, psoriasis flare-ups, muscle tension and joint aches, heart issues. We know that it elevates our heart rate and blood pressure, leads to cardiovascular disease, increased risk of high cholesterol and heart attack. We have gastrointestinal distress, either weight loss or weight gain, an increased risk of diabetes because it really affects your glucose levels. And our reproductive system is affected. Women have irregular periods that are more painful, and men can experience impotence or lower sperm production, and both can result in reduced sexual desire. Our immune system is definitely affected overall because if you're fighting the stress response internally, how can we now add external viral infections or bacterial infections on top of that? It just makes it more difficult to combat that. And here are some emotional, cognitive, behavioral, and interpersonal symptoms. Emotionally, we might experience irritability, dread, anxiety, fear, depression, hopelessness, loss of enjoyment, feeling down or overwhelmed. Cognitively, we can experience more cynical thoughts, negative self-talk, negative worldview, difficulties with learning and memory, zoning out, racing. Behaviorally, we can become more, we can procrastinate a lot more because of the stress and anxiety of potential outcomes, tardiness, absenteeism, decreased work performance, increased substance use, it's very common, nail biting and nervous habits, irregular sleeping, hypervigilance and agitation, over and under eating. Again, these are not exhaustive. Interpersonally, when we feel stressed, people tend to emotionally disconnect, not only from others, but from themselves as a coping strategy. And that over time is not adaptive. People tend to isolate, they have lowered patience and frustration tolerance, and some of them will avoid loved ones and healthcare providers. So is all stress bad? The answer is no. There's a lot of actual good stress. Good stress is called eustress. And eustress comprises of things that actually bring joy to our lives. It could be getting married. It could be having a baby. It could be getting a promotion. It could be anything that you perceive as good, but it activates the stress response in the exact same way as a bad stressor. So we still feel the same physiological, emotional, and cognitive symptoms we would as if we had experienced a bad stressor. The key thing to realize here is that good stress, aka eustress, is also optimal performance because we are motivated, we are able to mobilize our energy, we are focused and concentrated, and we have kind of a drive that's giving us that mojo to go, you could say. And then at the low end, if you look at the low end, boredom, that's when we have little to no motivation. This is not adaptive. And at the high end, we can lead to burnout. That's when we are depleted of resources and we are disengaged. So there's an optimal range of performance. Stress can help us be productive, but at a certain point, there's a threshold where it's not productive. This varies between individuals. You could become hyper aroused, which leads to the burnout symptoms. The goal is early detection and identification of your stress. So we want to manage our symptoms and identify them early before we reach the burnout zone. So what do we need to do? I like to use the metaphor of a car. We have the accelerator, and we can think of that accelerator as going, going, going. That activates the stress response, the fight or flight, aka also known as sympathetic nervous system. So it gets us going, we're motivated. Again, that's a positive stress. Over a threshold, it becomes negative, but it can help us. If we do not hit the brakes, which is also known as the parasympathetic nervous system, or the rest and digest, there's many names, tend and befriend, feed and breed, we can lend ourselves to all the aforementioned symptoms of stress. The goal is to achieve homeostatic balance. We want to accelerate, and we also want to brake, because we need the brake to restore our health, to recover, for tissue and cell repair, to calm down the mind, to reevaluate. When we are chronically in the fight or flight, the frontal lobe of our brain, which makes us human and allows for rational thinking, logic, problem solving, will shut down, because our limbic system in the brain will activate the fear response. Okay, so that shuts the frontal part down. We're not able to think clearly. And so we're just trying to escape a perceived stressful situation. But when we're in the rest and digest, we can calmly think about possible solutions and plan accordingly. So the key is to cultivate resilience. A lot of these stress management techniques are designed to stimulate the vagus nerve, which is a nerve that runs from the base of our brain down to our digestive system. And that's the part of us that can feel, like they call it the spidey sense, like you are able to detect dangerous cues in the environment and respond accordingly. It also is that feeling of the gut feeling you have when something might not be right, or butterflies in the stomach, they say. But that activates the parasympathetic nervous system, which is the rest and digest part of our autonomic nervous system. And so all of these techniques are designed to hit the brake. That's the brake. We need to achieve that balance. And we need the balance to go. We can't use the accelerator the whole time. We need to stop at the desired location. So we want to achieve flexibility. And every time you're able to implement a strategy that engages the relaxation response and to return to the resting rate, like a resting heart rate, you improve that connection in your brain, like the neural network and connections. So with increased practice, it becomes a lot easier. In the beginning, it takes a lot of effort and awareness and identifying your stress response, your unique stressors, and your unique symptoms. So we are going to cover some strategies. We first will talk about self-assessment and having honesty with oneself. Early detection and symptom identification. Multimodal therapies will include behavioral, cognitive, emotional, religious, or spiritual. Again, we want to think about this as a complementary and integrative approach to what you're already doing, maybe adapting some old coping strategies and modifying it for new ones. We want to increase your sense of control, your locus of control, and your support, because then we know that in uncertain situations, we can feel more anxious. And the more sense of control we have reduces our anxiety. And the other thing we need to know is that change is ongoing, and that's the only control we know, is that change is everlasting. And we'll review some prevention and recovery strategies. So self-assessment, it's an ongoing basis. We need to be able to self-reflect and be honest with our strengths, our limits, know our personal symptoms, stressors, and our resources. We may not be able to recognize that we don't have enough resources, and that means to advocate for oneself, maybe asking for help or seeking professional help from a medical doctor or a psychologist if the anxiety and stress is overbearing, knowing when that's your limits. So I've included a couple of evidence-based assessment tools that are widely used both in the psychological community and corporations and university settings. The first one really assesses your own self-care resources. It kind of determines where you're at. It's a 21 question quick questionnaire. It's designed for burnout and stress related research, excuse me. It taps into resilience building strategies in 5 domains, including professional support and development, life balance, cognitive strategies, things to think about, to reframe and challenge what you're doing, and a daily balance, and assessing your stress. So your perceived stress scale is one of the most widely used. It is 10 items. It's really quick. And again, it varies between persons and groups. So this measure is unique in the sense that it measures your perception of stress as opposed to the objective, operationally defined level of stress. So it taps into to the degree that we find our lives unpredictable, uncontrollable, and overloading. And these issues have been repeatedly found to be central components of the experience of stress. So here are about 9 to 10 stress management techniques that are very popular. Again, this is not an exhaustive list. We won't be able to go into all of them today because each one could be a course in itself, ranging from 6 to 30 weeks. A lot of practitioners use varying techniques and multimodal, using a biopsychosocial perspective to treat patients. I'm gonna select 3 for today that are the most heavily researched and have profound effects and in more immediate effects on stress management techniques. So we'll start with breathing. This is a most underutilized, under-recognized, I feel like, simple and easy to use, quick. You could do it anywhere. In Eastern practice, it's been used regularly with yogis and sages, and only up until about 15 years ago did Western civilization adopt this. So we're going to start with slow belly breathing. And what that means is that we are consciously and actively paying attention to our diaphragm, which is located, it's a muscle located underneath kind of our rib cage. And what we're doing is releasing that muscle down. So if you want to think about just when no one's around and you're completely relaxed, you let your belly kind of release, and it's expanded and distended. And what you can notice is that when your belly is completely relaxed and hanging, you can then have more access to oxygen in your lungs. And that's the goal of this. A lot of people engage in short breath and short breathing, shallow breathing. It's really anxiety provoking and can activate the stress response. So what it means is that slow belly breathing can activate the parasympathetic nervous system, which is the brakes for the rest and digest, and it can give you some sense of control over your autonomic nervous system. So we do have some control. If you can identify when you're in a stressful experience, if you have your symptoms activated, and you can implement this technique anytime, anywhere. And you want to breathe in through your nose and out through your mouth. And the goal is to really have consistent breathing. It's not about fast and slow. It's really having that consistent flow in and out. There was a 2010 international study that revealed slow belly breathing significantly reduced the fight or flight response within the sympathetic nervous system, which is the stress response, and enhanced vagal activity, which is the vagus nerve, which activates the rest and digest response, which is to relax, simply put. So this is one that I always recommend to everybody. If you can just do this 1 minute daily, it can improve your ability to self-regulate in times of distress, whether you're at work, at home, and especially on the highway, when you're not able to flee, you could say, to fight or flight. This one has been very effective. And for this class, I've included a little exercise. So feel free to try this technique right now. We're going to do it for 1 minute. And really focus on letting that belly go on the inhale, and envision your lungs just taking in the oxygen. And on the exhale, you're breathing in, breathing out, and your belly is actually going to the spine. And so it's almost like you're pushing out the oxygen. You can close your eyes, or you can leave them open, whatever feels comfortable. All right, so just take note of how you feel and kind of monitor your physiological response to that. The goal is to have about 6 to 8 breaths per minute. On average, though, people are breathing about 16, 18 breaths per minute. So if you ever wanted to try that little skill on your own, kind of measure how many inhales and exhales you do in a minute, you can kind of see where you're at and work from there. Again, if you have any underlying medical issue, that might not be the goal for you, 6 to 8. So don't feel like that's the optimal point. It might be different. It might be 10 to 12 for you, and that's okay. So the effects of breathing exercises, moreover, they're highly effective in reducing stress-related cardiovascular responses in pre-hypertensive, stressed out college students. Autonomic dysfunction, that's that balance, basically that it's out of balance, is implicated in those who have pre-hypertension. Studies suggest that therapies that include breathing techniques like this that modulates that balance are effective in patients with pre-hypertension. We will not get into that because I want to get to the other slides today, but that's called box breathing. That's just thinking, inhaling for 4 seconds, holding for 4, exhaling for 4 seconds, and holding for 4 seconds. There's a myriad of breathing techniques, but the slow belly breathing is the key one because you can use that with any other technique that's applied. Cognitive behavioral stress management techniques they really just emphasize how our thoughts affect our emotions and behaviors. It teaches recovery skills. It's geared to really identifying irrational thoughts that cause stress. And it's been really helpful and useful in health outcomes and anxiety and depression, symptom management for medical diagnoses, including chronic pain and bariatric surgeries in my experience and clinical experience. And it also teaches social skills and general relaxation techniques, but it's really used in chronic fatigue syndrome, breast cancer, heart disease, diabetes, depression, HIV, and any kind of painful medical procedure. So again, we want to highlight the role of control. We don't necessarily have control over our stressors impacting us, but we do have a control over how we respond to the stressor. So how we appraise that stressor and think about it. We know that our perception can activate either the fight or flight or the rest and digest, depending on how you're perceiving the situation. It's inevitable that you're going to perceive something and activate the stress response. That's normal. What we need to do is implement a stress management technique in the event that happens. So we can't always consciously activate or deactivate the stress response, because things are going to happen in life that are going to just activate it. What we can do is engage in some kind of breathing technique, mindfulness, cognitive behavioral stress management to then activate that break. We have control over that. So just being aware of your thoughts, increasing your sense of control in uncontrollable events, and your ability to choose. Again, that's the key thing, the role of control. That just by knowing that you have some control can reduce your stress threshold, or I'm sorry, increase your stress, reduce your stress threshold, excuse me. It increases your self-efficacy, your competence, knowing that you have some control in regulating your physiological responses to stressful events. Usually we think that it's not, that we think it's automatic and out of our control. And yes, typically it is, but now we know that we can activate that break, that rest and digest parasympathetic nervous system on our own. So be gentle and flexible with yourself, because it's not easy. It takes time. And if this was easy, we wouldn't have stressful people walking around. So reframing, challenging, or questioning your unhelpful thinking patterns is the key component in this intervention. And I've included 5 very common ones. There's about 15. So all or nothing thinking, which is like really polarizing and black and white, it really promotes discouragement. It's something along the lines of, I ate a donut last night, which blew my whole entire diet. Of course, that's gonna produce or invoke a stress response. We wanna think of it as a stress style, you know, okay, maybe I ate something bad this one time, but for the rest of the week, I ate pretty well. That will not engage the stress response. Jumping to conclusions are judgments without facts, which leads to anxiety and fear. Discounting the positive eliminates joy, satisfaction. It's really devaluing yourself and any little positive things that you've accomplished throughout the day. Should and must statements, I should have done this, we must do this perfectly. These are heavy, unrealistic demands that can lend to shame. And catastrophizing, everyone's done a lot of that. So tendency to blow things out of proportion. These all can lead to stress responses. So just take note of what you end up doing. Everyone engages in all of these. So it's very normal. We just need to manage it. So again, changing the way you think. We want to reflect on available resources, things that we have, our own innate capacity, our abilities, the support we have, satisfying experiences, things we've accomplished that we find joy in, keeping things in perspective, not jumping to conclusions or catastrophizing, looking at the facts as they are in real time, and being aware of your strengths. Control. So focus on what you can control, managing your thought patterns and your reactions. Work and personal obligations. If you need to change your hours or reschedule the way your day goes, asking and advocating for that for yourself, if that is a possibility. Prioritizing self-care, keeping a stress log, you know, that's that check-in. Am I okay? Even throughout the day, just doing that one slow belly breathing for 1 minute every hour can really have a huge impact throughout the day. Increasing gratitude. and put aside what's out of your control. We don't have any control over how others respond or other people's feelings or external events, aka the pandemic is a good one right now. And the third is mindfulness-based interventions. Simply put with this one, it's the intentional and conscious act of accepting with non-judgment our emotions, thoughts, physiological sensations, moment to moment. The key is being non-judgmental and having compassion with the current moment. A lot of people tend to judge that they're being judgmental, and so you'll find that that's pretty common. But over the course of time and regular mindful practice, this can train your brain and your mind to be present without judgment, to be the neutral observer. It's an active process, not to be mixed with meditation. Some meditations are relaxation or relaxing. However, mindfulness is the conscious awareness of your internal and external process in the present moment. It promotes an attitude of openness, curiosity, and presence. So the research reveals that these interventions are effective at reducing emotional stress in both clinical and healthy populations, reducing feelings of anxiety, depression, and distress. Moreover, the key thing about this one that differs from a lot of other ones is that it cultivates more positive emotion and improving overall physical health and well-being. The other ones mitigate and help manage, but this one not only mitigates and manages, but it adds that extra component of feeling more positive overall. And I like that picture on the right because it illustrates the simplicity of it. The guy on the left is thinking about anything, past, present, and future, all his worries and concerns, that he's not even able to be present with the sun and the trees and his dog. And the dog literally is 100% present in that moment. So just take note if you're being mindful or mindful. Another key strategy, which is again underutilized, underestimated, and not frequently used, just like breathing techniques, which is conscious breathing techniques, is exercise. There's been so many research studies that show exercise has been shown to ameliorate depression, anxiety, and it makes it ideal intervention because it doesn't require you going to gym. It just might be walking around the house or doing gardening or just doing gentle stretches. The goal is to aim for 30 minutes or more per day because they found that even a 10-minute walk can improve your mood that lasts about 2 hours. Rhythmic exercise, again, can help lift mood, increase energy, sharpen your focus, and relax the mind and body. Cardiovascular and resistance training are also great options for the long term. That has been shown to have beneficial benefits for your brain, and walking, dancing, yoga are good for also calming your body. So the key is to focus on being present, focusing on the sensations within your body as you exercise and thereafter. That's also incorporating mindfulness. You can incorporate all these techniques together, especially the breathing. And so lifestyle includes nutrition and sleep. We know that food affects us and they can spike your energy or dip your energy throughout the day. So avoid sugar and refined carbs if you can, because those are like high dips and low valleys if you are engaging in that kind of nutrition. Reduce caffeine, trans fats and foods, and chemical preservatives or hormones. Avoid nicotine and consume alcohol in moderation. Again, always consult with your primary care provider as it differs for each individual. So lastly, we're just going to go over some prevention and recovery. The key is to recognize early on your own symptoms, your own stressors. Recognize the role you play in stress, not only creation, but maintenance of the symptoms. So something stressful may have happened, but every time you think about it and every time you rehash it out, that's activating the stress response. Instead of rehashing it, you could activate the parasympathetic nervous system by maybe going for a walk or engaging in that slow belly breathing technique. Self-assessments, if you're unaware, you could use the objective measures that I provided. There's plenty online as well. Seek support and manage your stress. That helps reverse. Again, the more we hit that break, the more it's hardwired into our brain. We have neuroplasticity allows us to change the way we respond. And resilience. Build your resilience to stress by taking care of your physical, emotional, and spiritual health. Here are some key things for prevention and recovery other than symptom identification of symptoms and stressors, but finding mentors, engaging in altruistic activities, volunteering, meditation. If you need psychological help or psychiatric help, seeking out spiritual or religious resources as well, finding those communities, exercise, personal boundary setting. The one thing I want to point out is unplugging from technology. There's a lot of new research coming out about how they're super detrimental to your mental health. A lot of the social media creates a lot of depressive symptoms by comparison, socially comparing oneself to another, and or just disconnecting from the present moment. So please technologically disengage if you can, or set time aside that without technology, maybe an hour a day or 2 hours a day if you can. I know everything revolves around that, but it really helps you center and ground yourself, altering thought patterns as well. So self-care doesn't have to be expensive or time consuming, and it shouldn't feel like another item. Again, repeated small doses is the key. If you can do 1 minute of slow belly breathing a day, that's better than you were the day before. Here are some resources. The UCI Susan Samueli Integrative Health Institute offers free breathing exercises, the ones I reviewed today, slow belly breathing, diaphragmatic breathing. They guide you through it, and they have a progressive muscle relaxation which focuses on a body scan that tenses and relaxes specific muscle groups that can help activate that relaxation response. Autogenic training, which is again self-suggestion, how you think about things. You use self-suggestions to think of your arms and legs as warm and heavy. And UCLA has a lot of extensive research in the mindfulness called the Mark Center, and they offer free mindful awareness practices, drop-in meditations, downloads, workshops, and retreats. They offer a free app as well, and they have free studio recorded podcasts that you can download or you can listen to in the future. And these are just some other online resources for self-care assessment checklists and measures. The American Psychological Association and Centers for Disease Control offer some stress awareness education. And these are just resources if you want to research more about stress impacts. The American Institute of Stress, NAMI, National Institute of Mental Health, and HeartMath, which is heart rate variability, which helps you improve your cardiovascular health through breathing techniques, meditation, mindfulness, and the American Medical Association. So that completes our webinar. Does anyone have any questions?
I do see one question here in the Q&A.
Okay.
How do you control intrusive thoughts? And how do you control that stress in difficult situations?
Intrusive thoughts are a very complex one because that has been ingrained over time. And the good thing about a lot of these techniques is acknowledging that you have intrusive thoughts, step one. Step two is that while you're in the intrusive thought kind of cycle, if you can, this takes practice because I know I had to do it too, is taking that moment, even if it's after the cycle of the intrusive thought, just taking that moment to reflect and engage in a slow belly breathing technique. Because what it happens is the more you hit that break, it's rewiring your brain and the neural networks, that's neuroplasticity. We're rewiring how we respond. So it might start like oh, I was engaged in ruminative thoughts or intrusive thoughts for about, let's say, 5 minutes. I realized I finally got out of it. I didn't realize it until I was out of it. Let me engage in a breathing technique, and then set the intention for the next time if I have an intrusive thought, to kind of challenge it. Okay, I'm going to engage in the, I have a plan. So it's having a plan of action, being aware of when it might come, knowing what might trigger some of those intrusive thoughts. So it just takes time. It's doable. A lot of the times, if it's excessive, you might have to seek psychological and psychiatric professional help. But in the meantime, you can jot it down on a journal, and while you're in it, just be really mindful, just jot it all down, okay? That's another great technique, just to kind of go with the flow. It's like letting it out. And then at the end of it, you can then reframe all those thoughts and challenge them as well. So there's a couple things you can do. Does that help or answer the question?
Thank you, Tara.
Mm-hmm.
Again, if you have any questions, feel free to use the chat feature or click on that Q&A button. We will stick around for a couple of minutes here, but if there are any other questions or any comments, please feel free to shoot Tara or I an email. Our emails are there, just on the screen. Thank you. Just to reconfirm as well, I will also be sending out the recording once available, as well as the slideshow here. Let's see, one question, is it possible to show the resources slide again?
Oh, yeah.
Thank you.
I have a few. Did you have, does the person have a preference as to which one?
I'm not seeing it.
I'll kind of move.
They say the other slide. Maybe that one?
There's also these UCLA and UCI ones, but I'll keep it on this one. I think that's the one.
We will also send out the slides too for anyone wanting to review them again. One question here. I have a tendency to remember negative moments I had experienced in the past. How can I stop this cycle of negative thoughts?
So yeah, a lot of that would have to go into the challenging the thoughts, like the intrusive thoughts. We also call those automatic thoughts. They come up and they arise whenever they want to, out of our control. So I would suggest that when they arise, because I would suggest that when they arise, take note of the thought. Like in mindfulness practice, we take note of the thought non-judgmentally, as if it's kind of outside. We're like watching it on a smoothie screen. There's that negative thought. And then just notice the physiological sensations within the body and how you respond. So that's increasing your self-awareness about this thought and how you respond to it. If it's negative, it might cause stress. Again, the stress response is activated and cause more distress. In that moment, you can take that breath just to pause for one moment to engage in that relaxation response. And if you want, you can write it down or challenge the thought. Ask, where is this coming from? Is this true? Is there evidence for it or evidence against it? What is an alternative thought? What is actually true? So it's almost like giving the thought a reality check. But the key is in all of this self-awareness. If you can jot these down, the more you're aware of these thoughts, these are just thoughts. The thoughts are not you. We experience thoughts, but again, we are the ones observing the thoughts. So if we can come from that lens, we can also gain some control and mastery over that. So if a negative thought arises, I'm a horrible person, take a moment to breathe, jot it down, ask yourself, why am I a horrible person? Is there evidence for, evidence against? If there's something you did horribly, maybe that it's grief and loss acceptance that you have to deal with, but at least you're moving forward and progressing instead of getting stuck in that pattern of the negative thought. So the only way to move through intrusive and or negative thoughts is to be present with it, acknowledge it, challenge it, and move forward through relaxation, process talk with a licensed professional, or if you can do it on your own through self-reflection, that's great too.
Thank you, Tara. One last question here. I have an astrology client that is really stressing me out. How do I deal with them? Thanks a lot.
An astrology client. I guess that if you have a client that's stressing you out, I would, again, if you have a mentor or someone to consult with to kind of bounce back some of your concerns, this sounds like countertransference to me, unless there's more clarification in that question, but kind of having a discourse about your feelings towards this client with somebody else that you, a professional you trust, to kind of see where it's coming from. Is it coming from something in your past, or is it coming from this person? And how can you manage your response to maintain objectivity while you treat this person? So a lot of that has to do with self-reflection, consulting, and managing your own response and kind of doing some detective work into why that might be stressing you out. If it's inappropriate, you might determine that it might be inappropriate for you, and that's okay, you can refer out. But up until then, it's good to consult and determine whether or not it's you, maybe some implicit bias, or maybe that person is really just annoying and you need to consult and refer out.
Thank you, Tara.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I thank you everyone for attending our webinar. This does conclude our presentation. Again, if you have any further questions, please feel free to reach out to me via email. I have sent a couple already, or reach out to Tara. Her email is there. And thank you all for attending.
Thank you so much.